Hello everyone, and welcome back to the garage. This is part 3 of the Gottlieb Haunted House Pinball Restoration Series. We're going to fix a couple minor issues in the back box I still have to solve, and then after that we can start working on the playfield and cabinet side of things. So let's get started. So I've been looking at videos of other people's haunted houses, and apparently in attract mode, the game overlight should be blinking. It shouldn't be staying on like that all the time. And if you look closely at the light, you can see it's kind of flickering. It's going between full brightness and a little bit dimmer. And I can see that when the high game to date light comes on, that it is doing the same thing. It's not supposed to blink. It's acting correct. When the high score comes on, the light comes on, and then when it goes back to 0, it goes off. So that's correct, but I don't think it should be flickering like that. So what I want to do is pull out the driver board and take a look at the 2 transistors that drive those 2 lights and see if they need to be replaced. So to figure out which transistors drive those 2 lights, we need to take a look at the cabinet wiring. So right here we have the game over light and the high game to date light, and those are lamps L10 and L11. And if we follow them back, you can see they come from a connector, A12P4, and that comes from the transformers. And so you can see they get their 6 volts DC and ground off of 2 pins on that connector. And then if we follow them this way, they go into another connector, which then goes to connector A3J2, and that comes right off the driver board. And so the pins that we're interested in for those 2 lights are going to be pins 7 and 8. So let's go to the driver board schematic and find those. And so on the driver board schematic, connector A3J2 is right here. And so we're looking at pins 7 and 8 for L10 and L11, and those are the 2 transistors right there, Q11 and Q12. So those are the ones we need to take a look at. So I'm going to go ahead and pull out the driver board and we'll see if they are okay. All right, I went ahead and pulled out this board, and because this is a NEWIMF driver board, it's laid out a little bit differently than the original. But I was able to find the correct pins on this connector and trace them to the right transistors. It was a couple of the small ones over here on the edge. And I tested them with diode test on my meter, and they tested just fine. And I don't think that the NEWIMF board is going to have any issues because it's a new board. It's very unlikely to have issues. And there's also one other thing I have to consider. This thing is still running the NEWIMF CPU board. And so the software that's on this board could be telling the driver board to keep the game over light on all the time. It might just be a software difference between the 2 boards. And so to confirm if that's true, I'm going to get out my oscilloscope and we're going to see if it's actually telling the driver board to turn that light on all the time. And I'm going to connect a computer through this micro USB port up here on the top, because NEWIMF has an application that you can run to manually fire solenoids, lamps, and test out the displays. So I'm going to try out those things and we're going to see if it's just a software difference. So by hooking up a mini USB cable to the port on the top of the NEWIMF board, if we hook that up to a computer, we can run this little program called System 80 Control. And this is on NEWIMF's website. They have a program for both System 1 and System 80 boards where you can monitor and control the switches, the lamps, and the displays and see them update in real time. You can see that right now the software says board offline. So if I go ahead and turn on the machine, it's now switched to board online. And so the program is seeing the NEWIMF board in the machine. And there's a little LED that lights up near the mini USB port when the board and the computer see each other. So that's another way to confirm that they're talking to each other. And so when you hook up the USB cable, the board just powers up normally in attract mode, and it will stay that way throughout this process. But what we can do in the software is, if we hit the toggle game monitor button, it'll turn green, and now it is showing all the lamps, switches, and displays in real time. So you can see as the displays update, that will be reflected in the program. So it's shifting between 0 and whatever high score is saved. And you can see the lamps are toggling between red and green, so on and off. So that's the lamp matrix doing its thing in attract mode. And none of the switches are being activated, so of course those aren't doing anything. And I've been kind of playing around with this program a little bit just to familiarize myself with it. And I was able to figure out that the game over light being on all the time is actually a software difference between the NeWIMF board and the original System 80 CPU board. And I figured out that it is this lamp right here that is the game over light. You can see how it's green all the time. That means it is always on according to the CPU board. And so what we can do is toggle off the game monitor, and the program will kind of just freeze itself with whatever it was showing before, so I like to restart it. And so when you have the program not set to monitor everything in real time, what you can do is click on the individual lamps and the switches, and you can manually control them from the computer. So this one, L11, is the game over light. And so right now, the light is on. I'm going to go ahead and click it, and now it's off. So when I click that lamp on and off, that is turning the game over light on and off, as you can see. So the CPU board is able to talk to the driver board and turn that transistor on and off. So this is actually correct for the NeWIMF board. And I've gone ahead and put the game into its lamp test now, and I've turned the game monitor back on, and you can see all the CPU controlled lights are flashing. But I noticed that when it's in the lamp test, the game over light and the high game to date light don't flash. And at first I thought that was a problem. But if you look in the software, you can see the game over light doesn't flash. And the one right next to it here is the high game to date light, and you can see it is also not flashing. So this CPU board is acting normally. So we actually don't even need to use an oscilloscope to figure this out, because we were able to determine that right in the software here. And so this program is very handy if you want to do more in-depth testing to see if your CPU board's actually working right, because you get the display output, you get all of the lamps that are turned on or off, and you can test all of the switches and see if your board is actually receiving the input. So right now I have it in the switch test. And so, for example, if I were to hit the start button, I'm going to press it, and you saw one of those switches there on the bottom toggle. I'll do it again. So that was me pushing the start button. So you can see if your board is actually detecting that. And you can also control the sounds and the solenoids manually. So right now I have solenoid 1 selected, and so if I click that, you can hear it fired solenoid 1, and that happens to be the middle kicker right there on the top left. If I click it again, you can see that kicker fires. So you can do manual solenoid tests, and if I hit sound 1, it goes ahead and makes a sound. And so it is talking to the soundboard when I click sound 1. And you can also change the solenoid that you have selected. So for example, if I want to test solenoid 5, it fired solenoid 5, and you can do the same with the sounds. So very handy program, but even though the game over and high game to date lights are working, they still flicker a lot when they're turned on. And so I want to try to fix that problem, and I think I figured out where it is. So if we go back to that same page, you can see that the high game to date light, game over light, and the shoot again light, those get their power from A12P4 pin 13. That's the 6-volt DC pin. And if we go forward a few pages, here's the other side of that connector. And so if we trace pin 13 back, it goes over here, down, and it goes left right here, and it comes out right here to this little circuit where the bridge rectifiers are. And you can see the 6 volts comes right out of this bridge rectifier. And then there's a resistor and a capacitor that are tied to ground. And what I think the problem is this 100 microfarad capacitor is starting to leak, and it's letting some AC ripple through the circuit from ground, and it's causing lights to flicker. So I'll show you that capacitor, and we'll ESR test it and see if it's bad. So underneath the playfield is where all of the bridge rectifiers and fuses are, and this is the 6-volt bridge rectifier right here. And the resistor that it connects to is right here. It's a 0.33 ohm resistor, and that 100 microfarad capacitor is right there. It is attached from the resistor to another ground point. So let's see if that cap is okay. Well, what we can do to see if the capacitor is leaky is to put a voltmeter across it and test the resistance as it charges. And if it charges to infinite resistance, we'll know the cap is fine. If it stays at some resistance value, we'll know it's leaking. So I'm going to turn the game on, and I have the meter hooked up across it. And it seems like it is okay. Okay, yeah, that cap is fine because it had low ESR and it has charged. So the problem is not the cap. And so the only other thing in that circuit is the bridge rectifier itself, because before that is just the main power transformer. So I'm starting to think now that one of the diodes inside the bridge might be leaking and causing that flicker for the lamps. So I'm going to test all those diodes and see if any of them are leaky. We interrupt this pinball restoration now because I just discovered a brand new problem that just happened. All the sounds quit working. All the lights are fine and the solenoids are fine, but the soundboard is doing absolutely nothing. And I checked all the fuses and they are all okay. And so I went behind the back box just to check the boards and check the connectors and reseat them, and I found something on the sound power supply board. So this board provides all the necessary voltages to the soundboard, and I was wiggling this capacitor and it seemed like it was kind of loose. See how it's turning like this? It should be very solid because it's soldered to a PCB on the back. Well, when I looked on the back and kind of gave it that twisting motion, look what we have here. That solder pad on the left has lifted right off the board. And so now it's no longer connected. So that would be the problem, and what I'm going to have to do is sand off some of this solder mask so that I can extend the solder onto this part of the trace that's still intact, and then that should fix that problem. Well, that was not the fix. I put it in sound tests and it should be playing sound 1 right now, but it is not doing anything. And I made sure the problem wasn't just that the volume was turned down. I turned the volume pot and there's still nothing. So now we have a new problem to solve. Yay! Well, this might be the problem. Somehow one of the 2 speaker leads got unplugged when I was down here, so I don't know how that happened, and you'd think the other speaker would still work, but I'll plug those back in and we'll see if sound comes back. So with the sound test active, I push the start button. There you go. So it was just me not noticing that the speaker wires had come unplugged somehow. And it makes sense as to why this was the problem with both of the speakers, because I figured out the way this is wired is it comes through the harness into one speaker, out of this one into the other one, and then back out and up back through the harness again. So it's kind of like a return. And with that path broken, your sound isn't going to work at all. So thankfully that was a simple fix. All right, so I went ahead and diode tested all of the individual diodes inside the 6-volt rectifier, and they all tested perfectly fine. No resistance one way and about 0.6 to 0.7 volts drop the other way. So it seems like the bridge rectifier is fine. So now what I'm doing is I'm using my multimeter to measure the voltage going across that little 100 microfarad cap down there, because one side's connected to ground and the other side's connected right to the 6-volt output on the bridge rectifier. So what we should be seeing is a nice clean 6 volts across that cap. But I went ahead and hooked up my analog meter so you can see what it's doing. And look at how unstable it is. It should be right on the 6 on the bottom scale there, but it's going as low as around 5.5 volts, and I've seen it go as high as 7 volts. So the 6-volt rail is really unstable, and so that's why we're seeing problems with the lights. And so what I'm going to do to see if this is a filtering problem or if it's a bridge rectifier problem, I'm going to tack a 1000 microfarad capacitor across the 100 microfarad capacitor, and we'll see if that's enough to smoothen the voltage out. Before we do that, though, I figured I'd go ahead and put this machine in lamp test just to see how bad the fluctuation actually was, because now it's putting a lot more load on that 6-volt rail because it's doing all of the lights at once. Now look how bad it is. It's going between 5 to 7 volts. And again, that should be right on the 6 volt, or maybe a little bit above that. So that is the whole problem right there. So I'm going to try tacking a capacitor across the 100 microfarad one, and we'll see if that improves things. And so I've hooked up a 1000 microfarad 25 volt capacitor across the voltmeter leads, which is the same thing as tacking it across the other cap, because that's where the leads are connected to. So I'm going to turn it on, and let's see if our voltage is smoother. No, it is not. So the problem is not because of a lack of filtering, it's something else. Well, before I blame the bridge rectifier as being the problem, there is still a possibility that it may be due to a ground issue. And these System 80 machines are notorious for having ground problems. And if you take a look at the light sockets behind the backboard in general, you can see how rusty and oxidized they are. This machine must have been stored in a very damp environment, because even the wiring and the staples that hold the wiring in, they are just all rusted. I mean, every single light socket back here is just not looking good. And so I decided to bite the bullet and replace every single light socket in this game, because the vast majority of them look just like that. And I'm going to be replacing the Playfields anyway, and I'll have to desolder all the wiring for that. So I might as well put in some good non-rusty light sockets, because a lot of them have contact-related issues. And when you look at the ones back here, you can kind of see why. And I'm also going to be running new wiring throughout the backboard. I'm going to replace this original wire because it's not looking very good either. It's got some rust starting to form on it. So this is all going to look a lot better when I'm done. I'm going to do the same for on the bottom of the Playfields, because it's not looking too great under there either. So by fixing that, it may, I have my doubts, but it may fix the light flickering issue. And if after that, if I still see that it has the issue, then we can go look at the voltage rectifier. And speaking of lights, I went ahead and put some LEDs in the back box of this game, and this is going to be how it looks when it's completely done. So I put some red lights behind the words Haunted House, and I have cool white down on the bottom so it'll light up the words on the back glass a little better. I have a couple blues, and then the rest of it is all warm white, and then I left incandescent bulbs for the lightning strikes. And that's what that color configuration looks like with the back glass installed. And as you can see, it looks very nice. So at this point, we're basically done with solving all of the game's major issues. It's working really well now. So now we can start getting into the thick of it and go through the back box, start disassembling the Playfields, taking care of some cosmetic stuff with the cabinet and the coin door, and getting this game into a much better state than it is right now. So let's get into it. The first thing I want to tackle is this coin door, because it's got a lot of parts missing from it, and it needs a lot of work. Now, I'll do what I can to get this coin door to look better, but I don't think it's going to change very much, because it's oxidized all over the place, because clearly this game has been sitting in a damp environment. But it's missing the coin mechanisms. Some of the coin lockout clips that make this mechanism work are missing. The light sockets are all corroded, and so I want to replace those. And the price signs are not the American flavored price signs, so I want to change those out. Plus, it's also missing the coin return flap and the Gottlieb sticker on the front. And so to get inside the coin return mechanism on one of these Gottlieb coin doors, you have to remove this big piece here. It's held on by 2 nuts, but actually taking it off is kind of a pain, because the fit is so tight. So I'm going to pull that piece out so I can clean the inside of the coin return tray and install the new flap. Actually, you know what? I think if I remove these two screws here, I can take these little pieces off, and that'll make it way easier to pull that off. Okay, yeah, that's going to make it so much easier. I don't know how I haven't noticed that before. There we go. And then this piece just pulls right out as well. Well, that's about the cleanliness level I'd expect. See all the dirt in those? The actual coin return pieces are very oxidized and there's a little bit of rust starting. So I'll see what I can get those to look like, but those are going to have to receive a major clean. And yeah, looking at the inside of the coin door, looking in here, I can see a lot of dirt and a lot of oxidation and even on some of the little pieces in here. So I think I'm going to take this door fully apart. And so the first thing I want to remove is the piece that has the price signs in it, which is this big large piece here. And to remove this on one of these Gottlieb doors, there's a screw here and a screw on the other side, and then that can just pull out. Well, it's a good thing I removed that, because now you can see all the dirt that was behind that. Now I want to remove the start button and the coin door lock. And I think I'm going to try to remove the front fascia of the coin door, this whole front here. And you can do that just by bending these metal tabs on each corner of the coin door. But in order to do that, I'm going to have to remove these tracks that the coins ride down because they're installed at an angle. And if those are out of the way, it'll make it so much easier to remove that. And so not only are they screwed in with two screws right there, they're also held in with a little clip in the back that's a part of this piece. So I'm going to have to remove this too. And I found that using smooth pliers makes for very quick work of bending these tabs. Oh, do you have to remove the whole thing to get that off? I think you might have to. And so I think if I remove the two lamp sockets, this ground wire, the push button, and the slam switch, I can then remove the entire assembly and just pull it all out as one piece. And I think I'm going to have to do a little more work than that because I have this piece pretty much loose now, but there's some other little pieces on the coin lockout mechanism that I have to remove in order to free it from the rest of the assembly, so I'm just going to disassemble that. You know what? I think I might be a partial idiot because I just realized that this little assembly here for the coin rejection is entirely independent of these. The only thing that's kind of connecting them is this part of it right here, and I can just remove this spring and just pull it back. So I should be able to get that out. Okay, that's a little bit of the complexity removed. And so now I should be able to just remove the both of these, and then I can just kind of set them in the machine because all the wiring is going to still be attached. Okay, perfect. I can set all that just kind of off to the side. And then once I get out these 4 screws, everything else will pull out. And there we go. See what that allowed me to do there? The wiring is no longer attached to the door, and so now I can remove the screws that actually hold the door onto the cabinet, and I can take the front fascia off. And there you go. That's how you remove one of these silver Gottlieb coin doors. And so these are what the pieces look like that I was able to actually remove from the coin door and that didn't have to stay in the machine. And I was able to separate the front from the rear of the coin door. So that's what this looks like inside. Probably very few people ever see this. So there's your look at that. And then the other side of this piece actually isn't that bad. I mean, it's oxidized, but not horrible. So everything here and everything in the machine is going to get a very good clean. And because there's a lot of other things I want to get to in this video, to save time, I'll just show you the before and after shots of each of the pieces. And so with that, the coin door is done. Definitely looks better, and this thing was super filthy. I had plenty of buckets filled with rusty water when I was cleaning this thing up. So what I have done is I have installed 2 brand new coin mechanisms because, as you remember, they were missing before. I replaced the missing clips that were a part of the coin lockout mechanism assembly, so now that's all situated. And I replaced the actual wires that prevent the coins from going into the machine when the game is off, because both of the original ones, you can see they're starting to oxidize and get rusty. But they were both broken on this little part right here. This little hook is supposed to go all the way around like a semicircle, and so both of these are broken, so I replaced those. I put in 2 new light sockets because the originals were super oxidized, and I put a little bit of heat shrink around the base of the sockets so they wouldn't short out against the coin door frame. And if you look at the front, you can see it turned out really nice. I made some brand new price signs to put there, and I have new price sign holders because the old ones were very scratched. New sticker on the front, and a brand new coin return flap. Now, the original flap would have had this same texture that the coin door has, and Gottlieb made 2 versions of this coin door, the textured one like this, and the smooth version. And so that's why there's a smooth coin return flap. And as far as I can tell, no one is making or selling the textured version of the coin return flap. So if anyone would like to send me one, if you have like a parts textured coin door or something, let me know. And so that's the coin door. I think it turned out really good. So now we'll go ahead and get started with cleaning out the cabinet and replacing the playfields with brand new ones. And so begins the long journey to basically overhaul this entire machine and make it look like it just came out of the factory, because I'm going to be replacing all 3 of the playfields, all of the plastics, all of the missing parts, and everything that is broken or worn out. And so the first thing I want to do is remove the upper playfield, because you can take that out and it is completely independent of the main playfield. And so in order to do that, the first thing you have to do is remove the 2 screws in these posts here because the ramp has to come out. Well, the manual says the ramp should just pull up and out, but I don't know what's holding it in back here, so I'm just going to leave it loose and I'll go to the next step, which is to put the main playfield on its little support brackets underneath. And so what you'll do here is pull the main playfield open, and right here we have these 2 big brackets. Those are designed to rest here. And so we need to pull the playfield up so that it will rest on those. You can see there's a groove on the bottom of those brackets that's designed to slot right into that metal piece in the front. And then there are 2 screws tucked in the side of the upper playfield, one here and one on the other side here, but you can see this one's missing. So the whole left side of the playfield here is just loose because that screw's missing. So I'm going to have to find a new screw for that. And so now the upper playfield should be able to lift up in the front. There we go. And the manual says it slides forward. There we go. There we go. And now there's a few connectors that have to be removed. And now it should just lift out. There we go. Now I want to remove the lower playfield because to remove the main playfield, you have to disconnect all the wiring from the back box, and I'll have a lot more room if I take the lower playfield out first. And so for this, you just take it and slide it out of its grooves. And this playfield has 3 connectors that you have to remove, and they are all right there. And now I have to disconnect a whole bunch of back box wiring so I can remove the main playfield. Because all of that is attached to here. And this piece here is just asking to get destroyed because if I lean this playfield up on something, it's going to go right against this, and I'm just going to remove that before anything happens. Well, it's a good thing we're doing this because I just uncovered another section of the harness that was repaired kind of shoddily. So we have more of these screw terminals, and over here we have a bunch of wires that are taped up. So I'm going to have to do something about this, and I don't know if I can just solder these wires together because this part of the harness goes between the back box and the main playfield. And I don't know if these screw terminals are factory. I mean, is this really what Gottlieb did? Because they have a connector right here. So why couldn't they have just used a slightly bigger connector and put these wires into it? I don't know if that's factory, but I think what I'll do at some point is I'll just make my own connector for these loose wires, and then I can just disconnect 2 connectors whenever I want to remove that in the future. I can see the previous owner has labeled them, but the labels are so old and they're about ready to fall off, so I'm just going to put some new labels on that so I know where they go. All right, temporary labeling solution. Each pair of wires is now labeled 1 through 4, and so now I'll know which one goes to which because 1 goes to 1 on this side, 2 goes to 2, and so on. And so when I make a new connector for those, I'll know where they go. And so I have all of the playfields and their corresponding wiring removed from the machine. And so I'm going to be working on each of these playfields one at a time, and I'm going to go from smallest to largest. So the first one I'm going to work on is the mini upper playfield here, and you can see I found some little rubber cubes that I can use as spacers so that I can actually just set the thing like that, and then I can turn it over to work on the bottom side. Now, I've never done a playfield replacement on a pinball machine before, but I know what it takes, and so I'm going to have to come up with a plan for how I want to tackle it. And Haunted House is actually the perfect machine to do that because say I was to replace the playfield on my Pinbot, if it was like really worn or something, I would have to immediately start working on the huge main playfield, and it would be a little harder for me to come up with a system for taking it apart and putting it back together. But with Haunted House, we have little playfields like this. So I can start out with this one, and because it's smaller, it'll be easier for me to figure out how I'm going to do it with the bigger ones because there's not as many parts. And then after I finish this one, I can move to the basement playfield, which is that one there, and that one doesn't have a ton of parts either. And by that point, I'll kind of have an idea for how I'm going to be doing it, and then that'll make doing the main playfield a whole lot easier. So this is actually a great machine to do my first playfield replacement on. So here's what the inside of the cabinet looks like after I've taken all of the playfields out of it. Definitely dirty. Definitely going to be vacuumed and wiped down, as I do on all my machines. And I've got some loose parts kind of sitting in there, but you can get an idea for how filthy it is. But I think we'll tackle this last because I want to be able to just clean this and then put the new playfields right in. So I think we'll work on the playfields first. And wouldn't you know it, as I was lifting up the main playfield to get it ready to be removed, the pinball was still in it, and it dropped from the playfield into the machine, and it just so happened to drop right in there and hit that speaker cone at full force. And so it tore it from the edge of the cone on this side. So I'm going to have to take the speaker out and try to glue that back together. But if I'm not able to do that, then I'll just buy a new speaker. It should be pretty easy to find. So not a big deal that happened, but of course it had to happen. Something had to happen when I was removing those playfields. So I took that left speaker out, and I got lucky because the ball didn't damage the actual speaker cone itself. It just kind of separated it from the little outside layer there that they glued it in from the factory. And it didn't separate it very much. So what I'll be able to do is just put some UV curable resin across this part right here. And that stuff cures in like 5 seconds when you put a UV light on it. And it's very liquidy, so it'll just seep right on into that crack, and the speaker will be permanently fixed. And that resin did the job perfectly. So now, if I put light pressure on the back side of the speaker cone here, you can see now it is one piece again. So that speaker is now repaired. And this is the stuff that I used. It's JB Weld Super Weld. And it has a little switch on the back that turns on this UV LED, and that cures it in like 5 seconds. And I've used that stuff to do many types of glue repairs, and it is just awesome. So if you don't have this, I would recommend getting it. You don't ever have to wait for glue to cure ever again. So let's first start with the upper playfield restoration. So you can see how it looks right now. Got some wear. The plastics are filthy. I'm going to be replacing the plastics. And it's got a lot of dirt everywhere. And so that's what this looks like at the moment. And as part of this restoration, I'm going to try to do something about this. These pieces go all the way around the edge of the upper playfield, and you can see these when you're actually playing the game. And because they're all rusty like this, they aren't going to look very good on brand new playfields. So I'm going to try to do something about that. You can see it's starting to get heavily rusted and oxidized throughout the entire thing. I think the back piece is pretty bad. Let's see. Yeah, pretty oxidized. I mean, that one's not as important because you can't see it, but and the outside doesn't have one. So we're going to do something about that. And if you look at this angle, you can just see the sheer amount of dust that's on top of each of those plastics. And it's a good thing that Pinball Resource makes a brand new set of Haunted House plastics, because this one's got a crack in it, and this one is warped really bad right in the middle here. So all the plastics on this playfield and the other two are going to get replaced. The underside is looking pretty rough as well. You can see a lot of metal pieces have started to oxidize real bad. And I was looking at some of these light sockets under here. This is why I wanted to replace every light socket in the game, because the vast majority of them look just like that. And I don't know how those solder joints are still making a connection to those, but they are. So I'm going to replace all those with brand new light sockets. This game's going to have all new light sockets. And what do you know, another poorly done bodge wire. Using tape instead of heat shrink, and the wire is starting to break right there. So I'm going to have to replace that wire and do the bodge properly. So first we'll work on the top side and get all of the components I need to get off here off. And after we're done doing that, we'll work on the bottom side. So the first things to get removed are the plastics. So that gives us a better look at the inside, and you can see it's a little dirty and oxidized, but not in horrible shape. Next things to take out are the rubbers and the plastic posts. And one of the nice things about this playfield is that all of the light sockets up here and these 4 targets, all of that wiring goes to a single connector right down here. So I can just remove that entirely from the bottom of the playfield as kind of one big assembly. And I marked the back side of the targets underneath the playfield as 1 through 4 with a Sharpie so I know which order to reinstall them in. And I suppose I could do the same thing with the lamp sockets because I'm just going to throw them away because they're so oxidized. So I'll just label them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then for these 3 front ones, I'll do 6, 7, 7, 8. So that when I go to desolder those, I know where they go on the new playfield when I replace them. Because what I can do now is remove these 8 screws, and then I can pull the targets and the light sockets out. And there we go. That is now removed from the playfield. And now that those are out, what I can go ahead and do now is remove all of the side metal pieces and remove the ramp. And that'll kind of let me position the playfield a bit better, and it'll be a little easier to work on. And this is why I need to redo those pieces. That paint is coming off like crazy. So at this point, what I'm thinking is I think I want to leave most of the wiring just attached to everything so that I don't have to desolder a whole bunch of stuff and then put labels on the wires that say exactly where it goes, because I think I can get away with leaving most of it intact. I will have to desolder like the ground wire for the light sockets and maybe a couple other little things, but for the most part, I'm going to try to keep it together, and that might make it a little more hectic when it goes back together, but I guess that's just the way it goes with this. And once I get all the pieces removed from the playfield, I'm going to show you what they look like, because I have never seen a game so badly affected by oxidation and rust. I mean, all of the screws, they are just horrible. I mean, look at that. Every one is like that. So this is going to be like the overhaul of a century here. So at this point, I think I can start taking out some of the more little things like the screw mounts for the wire harness, the switches, and the light sockets. And then that'll kind of free the wiring up a little bit more, and then we can get the bigger stuff taken off. You know, I'm going to take this off first because it's just a few screws and it comes right off. And you know what I'll do with the light sockets just to make this process easier? I'm going to be replacing all of this stapled wire on all of the playfields because it's in really bad shape. I'm not even going to desolder it because I'm going to throw those light sockets in the trash. I'm just going to cut it off. because then I won't have to grab out my desoldering iron. I can just go snip, snip, and then when I'm putting the light sockets back in, the only wire I'll have to desolder is this one, and then that'll just go right to the new socket, and I won't have to worry about that anymore. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is take apart the bumper assembly, and so I've already went ahead and unscrewed the bumper body from the top side of the playfield, so that's just sitting there loose, but in order to separate it, I'm going to have to desolder the leads going to the bumper's light socket, and that's this wire and this wire. And you can see they both connect to one of the other light sockets that screws underneath the playfield. And so after I desolder those and remove these two nuts that hold on the metal piece that actually thumps the ball, I should be able to pull the whole top section of the assembly right out. And there we go. There's the bumper assembly. And so now the rest of this should be easy because it's just two screws that holds on this little assembly here with the switches, and then a few more screws and I can loosen this entire thing. And that is the bumper assembly all disassembled. So believe it or not, we're actually really close to being able to just pull everything off of the bottom of the playfield. So the only things I have left to remove are the two flipper bats from the flipper assemblies here, and then I can just remove each of the three screws on either side of the assembly, and then I should be able to just pull them all out as one piece. So I'll do that to both of these. And the drop target mechanism is only screwed on to the playfield with 4 screws, and then I should be able to just pull it off. And then I have to remove this switch over here. Everything else I have loose or removed, and so once I do all that, I should be able to just pull everything off, and then we'll have a bare bottom playfield here. So the flipper bats are held in with these 2 Allen screws, and they are mega tight because those are the only things that actually hold the flipper in its correct position. Okay. And if you're wondering why I'm not just taking everything apart piece by piece, I'm going to do that once I get everything off. I'll service everything and clean everything up. There's one. And on this game, this flipper assembly has one of those 2-inch flipper bats, but they're using an identical mechanism and the same exact coil, so it has the same power. If I pull the flipper out, you can see it's a little mini flipper. So now these are both loose, so those will come out once I pull the drop target assembly out. So now this should be free. Yep, it is. Now I can get to that final switch. All right, so this is going to be interesting. Let's see how easy it is to just take everything and put it over there. Actually, I have a better idea. Put the playfield on the table now because the only things on the top of it are a couple metal posts and some guide wires, so it's not going to hurt anything. Just kind of slide all this stuff off. All right, so that is the underside of the playfield. And after removing the last remaining screw posts and guide wires, this is what we're left with. The original worn down upper playfield, all stripped to bare wood. And here are the parts that I removed from the upper playfield. And just looking through this portion here, I've already found a few problems. One of the flipper assemblies, if we turn it over to the back, is it this one? Yes. It's missing a screw. You can see right there in the corner, there should be another screw there. So the whole flipper assembly, when it was actually screwed on to the playfield, was a little loose. So I'm going to have to find another screw for that. And on this little diode board here, I found a few problems as well. This diode's been replaced before, and it's not the right type of diode. It's not a germanium diode, so I'm going to have to replace that. And when I was going through and testing the rest of these 2 right here are shorted. The rest are fine, so I'm going to have to replace these 3 diodes. And I also went ahead and tested the other diode boards that were on the other playfields. So the basement playfield has 2 of them there, and the main playfield has 1, 2, 3. I tested all those diodes, and they are all perfect, so I don't have to replace any diodes there. There's also a diode board inside the cabinet there, but all those diodes are good as well. And the diodes that Gottlieb used on these boards are an older style that are kind of obsolete now, and so they're a bit harder to find. But I was able to find the exact type of diode that Gottlieb used on Amazon, a 10-pack. They are 1N270 germanium diodes, and they look exactly like what's on the diode boards. So I'll be able to replace those diodes, because I have noticed that some of the switches on the upper playfield when it was together weren't working quite right. So hopefully replacing those diodes will fix those problems. And then all of the smaller parts like the light sockets, targets, and brackets, and just some other stuff that I could actually remove, I have all sitting over here. And I don't know what kind of environment this machine was in before, but as I've said earlier, all of the metal pieces are just super oxidized and rusty. You can see how bad they are. And on this one, the plating itself is starting to come off. So all of these pieces, and these pieces you can see when you are playing the game. So what I'm going to do with a lot of these is I'm going to send them in to get replated, because this is not acceptable. This is the inside, but still, it's in horrible shape. So I'm going to see what I can do to get those pieces plated with some new chrome plating and make them look completely brand new again. Because if I'm restoring the playfields, I may as well restore some of those metal pieces as well and make them look nice. So that's the state of things right now. Upper playfield is taken apart. The next step is to kind of disassemble the main assemblies here, the flipper assemblies, the drop target assembly, and just clean everything out and lubricate the drop target assembly, because that's needing to be done. But we got a big step done. We completely stripped down the upper playfield. And so after I clean everything up, get those metal pieces replated and make sure everything is okay, we can get the brand new upper playfield and start putting all of the pieces on that, and it's going to look brand new. And I think that's a great spot to stop for part 3. In part 4, we will do a complete service on the upper playfield, get everything cleaned up, replace the actual playfield, and that will be one of the 3 playfields done. So stay tuned for that. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.